I never envisioned myself at 38 weeks pregnant, in an unoccupied residence, observing my husband prepare for a guy's excursion to Las Vegas. The luggage was spread open on our bed, our shared bed, as I lingered in the entrance, one hand on my expanded abdomen, suppressing the tears I didn't want him to notice. "You'll be okay," Tom remarked nonchalantly, adding another garment to the suitcase. "Your expected delivery isn't for another fortnight." He peered at me with the familiar half grin that once made my heart race, but now caused my stomach to twist. "Besides, you can always transport yourself to the medical facility if needed." The casual callousness of his statements lingered in the atmosphere. I sensed our baby's movement as though detecting my anguish. 7 years of matrimony, and this was the outcome. Me, solitary, while my husband prioritized his companions over his kin, yet again. "What if complications arise?" I inquired, disliking the frailty in my tone. "What if—" "Nothing will go awry, Olivia," he interjected, securing his suitcase with a decisiveness that resonated through the dwelling. "You're overreacting, as per usual. This is my final opportunity for leisure before the baby arrives, and everything transforms." Everything transforms. The phrase struck me like a tangible impact. In his perception, our offspring was already a hindrance, a cessation of his autonomy, rather than the commencement of something exquisite we'd forged together. Or so I had believed. I observed him depart, carrying his overnight bag and what remained of my fantasies about our union. The house felt expansive around me, replete with the spectral reverberations of all our unspoken words. I sank onto our bed, my hand still protectively encompassing my abdomen, and for the initial time I permitted myself to perceive Tom, truly perceive him, for his true self. The indicators had been present from the outset, hadn't they? The understated rejections of my sentiments, the way his eyes would roll when I voiced any apprehension, how he'd formulate plans without my input, anticipating my compliance. I'd dismissed it all, rationalized, attributed it to his mannerisms. But now, with our child on the verge of entering the world, the magnitude of his emotional detachment weighed heavily upon me. My phone vibrated. A message from my sibling, Emma. "Everything all right?" she inquired. I fixated on those two uncomplicated words, sensing them initiate a fracture within me. Was everything all right? Had it ever been? That evening, as I reclined alone in our excessively large bed, I sensed our baby's movements within me, vigorous and resolute. I placed both hands on my abdomen and murmured, "We merit a superior existence, little one. We both do." I was oblivious then, but those words would become my guiding principle in the ensuing days. They would provide fortitude when I required it most, valor when I felt adrift, and ultimately, they would guide me to make the most arduous and optimal decision of my existence. But initially, I had to endure the weekend. As I dozed, my phone illuminated with a notification. Tom, posting images from the airport with his associates, all grins and beverages, seemingly carefree. I flipped the phone and shut my eyes, endeavoring to disregard the intensifying pressure in my lower back that had been accumulating for the past 60 minutes. It wasn't until I experienced the initial genuine contraction that I comprehended this weekend might not unfold as Tom had so assuredly foreseen. The contractions commenced like a remote tempest, understated initially, then progressively escalating in force. By midnight, I could no longer refute what was transpiring. I perched on the bathtub's edge, timing the contractions with my phone's application, observing as they grew more consistent, more unyielding. 20-minute intervals, then 15, then 12. I attempted to contact Tom, once, twice, thrice. Each call went directly to voicemail. The final time I left a message, my voice quivering but composed. "I'm in labor. Please return my call." The words felt vacuous, insufficient for the enormity of the situation. My sister Emma responded on the initial ring. "Olivia, what's the matter?" "The baby's arriving," I managed between breaths. "Tom's in Vegas and I—" A contraction truncated my words, more potent than the preceding ones. I clutched the phone tighter, inhaling through the discomfort as we'd practiced in birthing sessions. Sessions Tom had attended begrudgingly, inspecting his phone more frequently than participating. "I'm en route immediately," Emma stated, her voice resolute and unwavering. "Remain stationary. Have you contacted your physician?" Dr. Patterson was already on duty at the medical facility. "Proceed here when feasible," she advised after I delineated my contractions. "But don't hasten. Initial births often require time." I assembled my hospital bag between contractions, realizing with an odd disassociation that Tom had never inquired about my intended contents. Each item I placed within felt like an affirmation. The delicate nightdress I'd procured for myself, the lavender-infused lotion that aided my relaxation, the diminutive yellow onesie my mother had bestowed. I was establishing a sanctuary for myself and my infant, a sanctuary that felt progressively detached from Tom. Emma arrived within 30 minutes, her countenance flushed from the urgency. She observed me and embraced me tightly. I hadn't comprehended how intensely I craved that fundamental human interaction until I sensed myself succumbing in her arms. "He simply departed," I lamented, the words I'd suppressed all day finally surfacing. "He was aware this could occur, and he simply departed, as though we were inconsequential." "Hey!" Emma drew back, her hands on my shoulders, her gaze intense. "You are consequential. This infant is consequential. And presently, both of you require your fortitude. We can address Tom subsequently." As though on cue, my phone illuminated with a text from him. "A group photograph at some establishment, everyone holding beverages. Tom's arm encircling a blonde woman I didn't recognize." The caption read, "Vegas, baby, best weekend ever." I fixated on the image until another contraction engulfed me, this one potent enough to elicit a gasp. Emma retrieved the phone and deactivated it without a word. "We're proceeding our way," she declared, assisting me in breathing through the discomfort. "You don't require his negativity presently." The journey to the hospital was dreamlike. The city thoroughfares were virtually deserted at this hour, streetlights projecting elongated shadows across the asphalt. Each contraction felt like a surge, now intensifying and culminating, demanding my complete focus. Emma maintained one hand on the steering wheel, the other extending to grasp mine, providing a grounding presence amidst the upheaval. At the medical facility, the personnel were anticipating us. A nurse named Maria assisted me into a wheelchair, her benevolence causing my eyes to well up once more. "First infant?" she inquired tenderly. I assented, then appended, "My spouse is absent." Maria's gaze met Emma's momentarily, and something unspoken transpired between them. "Well," Maria remarked, her voice cordial and resolute, "you possess quite a support network here. Let's ensure your comfort." The labor and delivery chamber bore little resemblance to my prior imaginings during those months of readiness. It was simultaneously more sterile and more reassuring than I'd anticipated. Emma assisted me in changing into my nightdress, while Maria prepared monitoring apparatus. The resonance of my infant's heartbeat pervaded the room, vigorous, unwavering, determined. "Your little one is thriving," Maria reassured me, adjusting the monitors. "And you're already at 5 centimeters dilation. You've been undertaking the arduous portion independently at home." "All by yourself." The phrase resonated in my consciousness as another contraction intensified. I hadn't been solitary, not genuinely. I had my sibling, my physician, this compassionate nurse. I had myself, more resilient than I'd acknowledged. And I had my infant, this diminutive individual who was already imparting lessons on fortitude and resolve. As the night deepened and my labor escalated, I found myself contemplating Tom's non-attendance less and the prospective future more. Each contraction propelled me closer, not merely to encountering my infant, but to an epiphany that was gradually materializing in my psyche. The sun was just commencing its ascent when Dr. Patterson returned to examine me. "You're nearly there, Olivia," she stated encouragingly. "Your infant will be here imminently." I clutched Emma's hand tighter as another contraction reached its zenith. Through the window, I could observe the sky transitioning from obsidian to profound azure to roseate, nature's intimation that even the most protracted night ultimately concludes. My phone lay neglected in my hospital bag, still deactivated, while somewhere in Vegas, Tom was likely just retiring for the night. What he was oblivious to, what I was just commencing to comprehend myself, was that when the sun ascended fully, everything genuinely would be altered, just not in the manner he'd envisioned. It's often said that childbirth transforms you irrevocably. What isn't conveyed is that occasionally the transformation initiates prior to the infant's arrival, in those concluding moments when you're suspended between your former self and your impending self. "You're fully dilated," Dr. Patterson proclaimed, her voice penetrating the haze of my fatigue. "It's time to push, Olivia." The morning sun was now streaming through the aperture, casting a golden radiance across the delivery chamber. I'd been in labor for nearly 12 hours, each contraction propelling me nearer to this juncture. Emma hadn't departed my side once, her steadfast presence a stark antithesis to Tom's non-attendance. "I can't," I murmured, seized by an abrupt apprehension. "I'm not sufficiently resilient." "Observe me," Emma stated resolutely, her hand constricting mine. "You've already demonstrated your fortitude. You possess this beauty." The subsequent contraction surged like a tidal wave, and with it emerged a primal compulsion to push. I exerted all my strength, channeling every iota of exasperation, dread, and resolve I'd been harboring within. Through the acute pressure and searing sensation, I discerned Dr. Patterson's encouraging pronouncements. "That's it, Olivia. Your infant is arriving." Between pushes, my thoughts flitted to Tom. He would be awakening in his hotel chamber about now, likely nursing a hangover, completely oblivious that his progeny was on the verge of entering the world. I had ceased attempting to contact him hours prior, after Emma displayed his latest social media post, a bleary-eyed selfie captioned, "What transpires in Vegas?" Another contraction, another push. I concentrated on my respiration, on the unwavering beep of the fetal monitor, on Emma's voice counting down with me. The pressure intensified to an almost excruciating level. "The head is crowning," Dr. Patterson declared. "One more substantial push, Olivia." With a concluding surge of vigor I didn't realize I possessed, I pushed. The pressure crested and then abruptly dissipated. A diminutive wail pervaded the room, vigorous, indignant, animate. "It's a girl," Dr. Patterson proclaimed, placing my daughter promptly on my chest. "She's flawless." The world constricted to this singular instant, my daughter's tepid weight against my epidermis, her diminutive digits flexing, her eyes squinting up at me. She possessed a profusion of dark hair, my nasal structure, and what appeared to be Tom's chin. But as I gazed at her, I discerned something additional, something entirely her own. A fierce autonomy, already discernible in the manner she held her head, in the vigor of her cry. "Greetings, little one," I murmured, tears coursing down my face. "I'm your mother." Emma was weeping too, her phone neglected in her hand as she leaned in to observe her niece more closely. "She's exquisite, Olivia. Absolutely exquisite." The ensuing hour elapsed in a whirlwind of medical interventions and initial moments. My daughter, whom I christened Lily, was weighed, measured, and proclaimed impeccably healthy at 7 pounds, 6 ounces. I delivered the placenta, was cleansed, and assisted in nursing Lily for the inaugural time. Throughout it all, my phone remained mute. No calls, no texts from Tom. It wasn't until later, when Lily was slumbering placidly in the bassinet beside my bed and Emma had departed to contact our parents, that I finally reactivated my phone. The messages inundated immediately. Missed calls from acquaintances, congratulatory texts from colleagues who'd received the news via Emma, and ultimately, a solitary text from Tom, dispatched just 30 minutes prior. "Flight postponed. Vegas has been chaotic. Should be home this evening instead of this afternoon. Hope everything's still all right there. I fixated on the message, sensing an unfamiliar tranquility envelop me. In those few nonchalant words, Tom had disclosed everything I required to comprehend about his priorities, his character, and the prospective future that awaited us if I remained. Lily stirred in her bassinet, emitting those diminutive newborn sounds that already tugged at my core. I extended my hand to caress her cheek, marveling at her impeccable features, her absolute innocence. In that touch I made a pledge to her and to myself. "We merit a superior existence," I murmured, echoing the phrase I'd uttered just yesterday, though it felt like an eon ago. But this time, they weren't merely words. They were a declaration of independence. I retrieved my phone and commenced composing a message to my sister Emma. "When you return, we need to converse. I comprehend what I must do." As I dispatched the message, Lily opened her eyes and gazed directly at me, her gaze surprisingly concentrated for a neonate. In that instant, I felt more resilient than I ever had in my existence. The path ahead would be arduous, but I was no longer apprehensive. I had brought a new life into the world independently. I could certainly construct a new life for us as well. The sun was high in the sky now, permeating the room with tepid illumination. In a few hours, Tom would arrive in Las Vegas, inspect his messages, and ultimately comprehend what he'd forfeited. But by then, the alterations would already be underway. Because while he'd been gambling in Vegas, I'd acquired something far more precious: my lucidity, my valor, and the unwavering conviction that my daughter merited an upbringing where she witnessed her mother's fortitude, esteem, and worth. I retrieved my phone one final time and accessed my banking application. The joint account Tom and I maintained exhibited several substantial withdrawals from the Bellagio casino. I inhaled deeply and pressed the number for our family attorney, preserved in my contacts for what I had always rationalized as just in case. That just in case had ultimately materialized. The subsequent 24 hours elapsed in a vortex of infant cuddles, medical examinations, and hushed readiness. I hadn't informed Tom about Lily's birth, a decision that astounded even myself with its ease. Each time my digit hovered over his contact information, I recalled his nonchalant dismissal of my apprehensions, his mirthful suggestion that I could transport myself to the medical facility. Mrs. Walker, a nurse I hadn't encountered previously, entered the room, holding a tablet. "Your spouse just contacted the reception desk. He's en route." My cardiac rhythm accelerated, but I maintained my vocal composure. "Thank you." I peered at Emma, who comprehended instantaneously. She retrieved Lily from my arms and settled into the chair by the aperture. Tom burst into the room minutes later, still carrying his overnight bag, his countenance flushed and hair disheveled. He halted abruptly at the sight of Lily in Emma's arms, his mouth agape. When?" he stammered, gazing between me and our daughter. "Yesterday morning," I stated softly, observing his countenance. "Approximately 6 hours after you posted that group photograph from the club." He advanced, extending his hand toward Lily, but Emma subtly averted, continuing to rock our slumbering daughter. The message was unequivocal: he would not be permitted to sweep in and enact the doting father without acknowledging what had transpired. "Why didn't you contact me?" he demanded, his tone escalating. "I had a prerogative to be informed." "I did contact you, Tom. Thrice, when my labor commenced. Then I texted. Then I called again." I maintained my voice subdued, mindful of Lily. "You were too preoccupied having the best weekend ever to inspect your phone." He possessed the decency to appear embarrassed, but only momentarily. "You were aware this was my final opportunity for leisure before the infant arrived. You could have deferred." "Deferred?" Emma interjected, her tone incisive. "What precisely do you perceive labor to be, Tom? A prearranged appointment?" He ran a hand through his hair, exasperation palpable. "That's not my intention. This was intended to be our shared moment, and you've transformed it into some sort of ambush." I sensed a tranquility envelop me. the kind that accompanies absolute certitude. No, Tom, you transformed it into this, the instant you determined that a weekend of revelry was more paramount than being present for your spouse and offspring. I'm present now, he protested, extending his arms. I arrived as promptly as I received notification. You're present now because the reception desk contacted you to inform you your spouse had given birth. I rectified him. Not because you were sufficiently solicitous to inquire about me yourself. A sound from the corridor caused us all to turn. My parents stood in the entrance, my mother's countenance a fusion of elation at seeing her granddaughter, and scarcely restrained ire at Tom, my father's expression more inscrutable, but his hands clenched at his sides. Mom, Dad, I stated softly, meet your granddaughter Lily. My mother advanced past Tom as though he were non-existent, proceeding directly to Emma and the infant. My father remained in the entrance, his gaze fixated on Tom. Mr. Collins, Tom commenced, but my father raised a hand. Refrain. He stated quietly, I believe you've uttered sufficient. The tension in the room was tangible. Tom peered around, seemingly comprehending for the initial time that he was completely solitary in this predicament. No one was going to hasten to ameliorate matters, to rationalize for him, to feign that everything was satisfactory. Olivia, he attempted again, his tone assuming the cajoling inflection I'd heard so frequently prior. Baby, I comprehend I erred, but we can rectify this. We're a family now. I gazed at Lily, placid in my mother's arms, then back at Tom. You're accurate about one aspect. We are a family, Lily and I, and we merit a superior existence than someone who perceives us as an encumbrance. What are you implying? His tone now possessed an edge. I reached for the envelope on my bedside table, the one my attorney had delivered earlier that morning. I'm implying that when I depart this medical facility, I won't be returning home with you. The documents within were unambiguous and succinct. A separation agreement, a provisional custody arrangement, and a comprehensive accounting of our joint finances, encompassing his Vegas expenditures. Tom's countenance transitioned from crimson to ashen as he scanned the documents. You can't do this, he sputtered. You can't simply decide. Actually, I can, I interjected, my voice more resolute than I'd ever heard it. And I have. You can either endorse these presently, and we can manage this amicably, or we can permit our attorneys to resolve it. But irrespective, this is transpiring. He peered around the room once more, perhaps anticipating someone would take his side, inform me I was being unreasonable, but he encountered no allies there. My father advanced fully into the room now, shutting the door behind him with a subdued click that somehow seemed to resonate with finality. Lily selected that instant to awaken, her diminutive countenance scrunching before emitting a wail. Without contemplation, Tom retreated from the sound, while I instinctively reached for her. The contrast in our responses conveyed everything about our preparedness for parenthood. As my mother placed Lily in my arms, I gazed up at Tom one final time. You can be an element of her existence, Tom, but you'll have to earn it, and it commences with respecting me as her mother. He lingered there for a protracted moment, the documents crumpled slightly in his grip, gazing at the daughter he hadn't troubled to be present for. Ultimately, he placed the documents on the foot of my bed. I'll have my attorney scrutinize these, he stated stiffly, then turned and departed the room without another word. The door shut behind him, and I exhaled, unaware I'd been retaining my breath. Lily had settled against my chest, her diminutive hand clutching my hospital gown. My mother reclined on one side of the bed, my father on the other, while Emma maintained a vigil by the door. You performed admirably, sweetheart, my father stated softly, placing his hand over mine. You performed exceptionally well. I gazed down at my daughter, sensing tears glide down my cheeks, not of despondency or dread, but of alleviation and resolve. The arduous portion wasn't concluded, not remotely, but for the initial time and years, I felt precisely where I was intended to be, undertaking precisely what I was intended to do. Outside, the afternoon sun projected elongated shadows across the hospital room floor. Another day was concluding, but for Lily and me, it was merely the inception. The initial weeks of motherhood were a haze of nocturnal feedings, diaper alterations, and acclimatizing to an entirely new cadence of existence. But they were also my initial experience of genuine autonomy, something I hadn't comprehended I'd been forfeiting until I rediscovered it. Emma had insisted I reside with her until I regained my footing, and her spare bedroom became our sanctuary. It wasn't expansive, but it sufficed for a bassinet, a changing table, and the essentials I'd assembled while Tom was at work the day following my departure from the hospital. The remainder of my possessions were in storage, awaiting my procurement of a residence of my own. "You didn't take much," Tom had remarked when he returned home to discover half the closet unoccupied. He stood in the entrance of our bedroom, his bedroom now, observing as I secured my final bag. "I solely took what was mine," I retorted, inspecting Lily in her carrier. She was slumbering placidly, oblivious to the tension in the atmosphere. "Everything we acquired for the infant remains in the nursery. We can establish a schedule once you've endorsed the documents." His attorney had been scrutinizing the separation agreement for a week, proposing modifications that my attorney and I had predominantly accepted. It wasn't about prevailing anymore, it was about advancing. Now, 3 weeks later, I was seated in a realtor's office, Lily slumbering against my chest in her wrap carrier, while Emma reviewed listings on the agent's computer. "This one's within your financial parameters." Monica, the realtor, indicated a 2-bedroom apartment in a tranquil neighborhood. "First floor, so no stairs to navigate with the stroller. There's a park nearby, and it's still within the school district you mentioned." I was contemplating school districts already. It seemed surreal, but also appropriate. Every decision I made now wasn't solely for me. It was laying the groundwork for Lily's future. "I'd like to view it," I stated, adjusting Lily as she stirred. "Today, if feasible." Monica made a swift call while Emma perused additional photographs of the apartment. "It appears promising, Olivia. Abundant natural illumination, and that kitchen is significantly superior to the last residence we inspected." The apartment was everything Monica had pledged and more. Lofty ceilings made the modest space feel larger, and the second bedroom possessed a window seat I could already envision becoming Lily's reading nook when she was older. The kitchen opened to a diminutive dining area, and the living room had integrated bookshelves that evoked thoughts of all the impending bedtime stories. "The landlord is amenable to a 2-year lease," Monica elucidated as we traversed the apartment. "And they permit painting, provided you restore it to neutral upon your departure." I stood in what could be Lily's room, envisioning delicate yellows and gentle greens on the walls. This could be home. "I'll accept it," I stated, astounding myself with my certitude. Later that evening, as Emma and I reclined on her couch with tea, Lily slumbering in her portable bassinet nearby, my phone vibrated with a text from Tom. "Endorse the documents today. Attorney will deliver them tomorrow. Can we discuss visitation?" I displayed the message to Emma, who constricted my hand. "You've got this," she stated softly. I typed back, "Thank you. Yes, we can discuss visitation. I'm relocating to a new residence next week. We can convene with the mediator to establish a schedule." His response arrived promptly. "A new residence? Where?" I inhaled deeply before replying. "I'll share the address once everything is finalized. We can arrange supervised visits at my parents' house until then." There was a protracted pause before his subsequent message. "Supervised? I'm her father, Olivia. You can't preclude me from her." "I'm not precluding you from her," I composed. "I'm establishing boundaries. We can reassess the arrangement in a few months, contingent upon progress." No response ensued after that. I placed the phone down and proceeded to inspect Lily. She was commencing to stir, precisely on schedule for her evening feeding. As I lifted her, she opened her eyes and gazed at me with that intense gaze that still astounded me. "Tomorrow's a significant day, little one," I murmured, settling into the rocking chair Emma had procured for us. We're embarking on a shopping excursion for your new chamber." The ensuing days elapsed in a whirlwind of preparations. My parents assisted with the security deposit for the apartment despite my protests. "Consider it an investment in our granddaughter's future," my father stated in a tone that brooked no dissent. Emma took time off work to assist me with painting and relocation. We selected a delicate buttercream for the living room and that gentle green I'd envisioned for Lily's room. With each brushstroke, each box unpacked, each piece of furniture arranged, our new home materialized. The inaugural night in the apartment was simultaneously terrifying and liberating. After Emma departed, after Lily was nourished, changed, and slumbering in her crib, a gift from my parents, I stood in the center of my new living room and simply inhaled. The space was smaller than the house I'd shared with Tom, but it felt larger somehow, perhaps because there was no tension in the atmosphere, no treading on eggshells, no constant awareness of another individual's mood dictating the ambiance of the dwelling. My phone vibrated. Another text from Tom. "My attorney indicates supervised visits aren't requisite. I desire to see my daughter." I gazed at Lily's slumbering form on the baby monitor and typed, "We can discuss this with the mediator on Tuesday. I've already scheduled the appointment." Then I deactivated my phone, prepared myself a cup of chamomile tea, and curled up on my new second-hand couch with the parenting book Emma had bestowed upon me. Through the aperture, I could observe the park Monica had mentioned, its trees silhouetted against the evening sky. In the tranquility of our new home, with my daughter's subdued respiration emanating through the monitor, I sensed something I hadn't experienced in years: serenity. Not the spurious serenity of evading discord, but the genuine serenity that emanates from comprehending you're precisely where you're intended to be, undertaking precisely what you need to do. A diminutive cry emanated from Lily's room, not distressed, merely signifying her readiness for her subsequent feeding. As I arose to attend to her, I caught my reflection in the aperture. The woman gazing back at me was fatigued. Yes, but also more resilient, more self-assured than the one who had observed her husband pack for Vegas just a few weeks prior. That woman had been apprehensive of solitude. This one was apprehending that solitude was far superior to being with someone who caused you to forfeit your own worth. The mediation office was situated in a contemporary edifice downtown, its walls adorned in calming hues of azure and gray. I arrived prematurely, Lily slumbering soundly in her carrier, and found myself scrutinizing my reflection in the elevator's mirrored walls. I had selected my attire meticulously, a navy blazer over a simple dress, professional yet approachable. The woman in the reflection appeared capable, composed. I straightened my shoulders, reminding myself that I was Olivia. Tom's voice emanated from behind me as I registered at the reception desk. I turned to discover him standing there in his finest business suit, the one he donned for significant client meetings. He appeared fatigued, the kind of fatigue that stems from more than merely sleep deprivation. "Hello, Tom," I retorted, maintaining my tone neutral. His gaze went promptly to transpired next. As though deciphering my thoughts, Lily emitted a contented gurgling sound. I turned to her, sauce-covered spoon in hand. "That's correct, little one," I stated, smiling. "We've got this, one day at a time." The setting sun streamed through the kitchen aperture, casting everything in a tepid radiance. In that instant, I sensed something shift within me, the final vestiges of uncertainty yielding to hushed self-assurance. The path ahead wouldn't be facile, but I was prepared for it. I was prepared for everything. 3 months can transform everything. Lily was developing more rapidly than I could conceive, her personality manifesting more each day. She possessed Tom's grin, something I'd ultimately reconciled with, but her resolve was entirely her own. The supervised visits had been proceeding sufficiently well that we'd commenced deliberating the transition to unsupervised time, though Tom's zeal for parenting seemed to fluctuate. I was seated in my preferred coffee establishment, revising my resume while Lily napped in her stroller, when a familiar voice captured my attention. "Olivia? Olivia Walker?" I gazed up to discover Mark Tremble, my former colleague from the marketing firm I'd worked at prior to joining Tom's company. He was carrying his laptop and a cup of coffee, appearing precisely as I recalled. Benevolent eyes, salt and pepper hair, and that genuine grin that invariably made everyone feel at ease. "Mark, it's been, what, 3 years at least?" he stated, then noticed Lily, his grin softening. "And who's this little one?" "This is Lily," I stated, adjusting her blanket. "She's 3 months old." "She's exquisite." He gestured to the unoccupied chair opposite me. "Mind if I join you for a moment? Unless you're preoccupied." I peered at my laptop screen, where my half-completed resume stared back at me. "Actually, I could utilize a respite, and perhaps some counsel if you're amenable." Over the ensuing hour, Mark and I caught up. I found myself recounting everything: the pregnancy, Vegas, the separation. He listened without condemnation, occasionally offering perspectives from his own experience as a divorced father of 2 adolescents. "You know," he stated thoughtfully, "we're actually seeking someone to head up our digital marketing division, someone who comprehends both the creative and analytical facets." My heart palpitated. That had been my specialization prior to Tom convincing me to depart and join his family's enterprise. "Are you serious?" "Very. The hours are adaptable, and we possess an on-site daycare center now." He extended his business card. "Contemplate it. I'd be delighted to have you back on the team." That evening, as I bathed Lily, my thoughts were racing with potentialities. The position would be impeccable, an opportunity to recommence my career on my own terms, but it would also entail significant alterations in our routine, encompassing the visitation schedule with Tom. As though on cue, my phone vibrated with a message from the co-parenting application. Tom desired to modify Saturday's visit time again. "Can we shift it to 4 p.m.? Client meeting prolonged." I inhaled deeply, recalling Dr. Tremble's counsel about adaptability versus boundaries. "The agreement stipulates 2 p.o. Lily requires consistency. Please endeavor to arrange meetings around your time with her." His response arrived promptly. "It's a significant client, Olivia. Don't be challenging." "I'm not being challenging. I'm being a parent. 2 p.m., or we need to reschedule for another day." After a protracted pause, "Fine, I'll manage it." Progress of sorts. The former me would have rearranged everything to accommodate him. The new me comprehended the significance of remaining resolute. The subsequent morning, I dropped Lily off at my mother's residence and proceeded to interview at Mark's firm. The office had transformed, more open, more contemporary, but the energy was familiar, creative, collaborative, animate with potentialities. "The position is yours if you desire it," Mark stated after my presentation to the